Towards the end of World War II, the Germans were truly desperate. So desperate that they recruited practically anyone who could literally hold a rifle in their hands to put them into those units. These are known as the Volkssturm, a paramilitary organization of the Nazi Party, created specifically to defend Germany to the last man, to the last drop of blood. And the most common weapon in the Volkssturm was the Carcano. Yes, because the Carcanos were captured in huge quantities in Italy after September 8th, and many of them underwent a conversion program to the 8mm Mauser. The Germans didn't produce the 6.5 Carcano, they didn't produce the clips for the Carcano, so there was a logistical problem. This conversion program is rather mysterious, but fortunately our very own Ruggero Pettinelli shed light on it with a 2014 article citing documents that even explain their purpose. So we know the history of these weapons very well. So let's take a look together at the history of what is perhaps the last Carcano. After the armistice of September 8, 1943, a lot of weapons fell into the hands of the Germans. Weapons that would be systematically packed up and shipped to Germany. At that time, in 1943, despite the bombings, Germany still had a rather efficient logistical system. Some of these weapons would go to arm the units of the Italian Social Republic, many of them, and would remain in storage, available for use. For a possible future military use. And this military use would come in 1944. Now, I hope historians won't mind, but if in 1943 the situation was still more or less stable for Germany, in the second half of 1944 things went downhill pretty quickly. Between the Allied landing in Normandy, the capture of Rome, and movements on the Eastern Front, things are not going very well for the Germans. Despite the beliefs of the supreme leader and the propaganda machine around him, which convinced the population that everything would be fine, most of the military and high-ranking officials knew they had to prepare for the defense of Germany. In October of 1944, the Volkssturm, the People's Assault, would be established, a territorial militia under the Nazi Party that vaguely resembled the Prussian Landwehr in form. These second or even third-tier units were called up for service when the enemy was very close for one last desperate defense. Many books have been written about the Volkssturm, and it's a very interesting topic in its own right for those most passionate about World War II history. For our story, it's enough to know that it was organized into age and quality groups, where the first bracket or draft was relatively well-equipped. The following brackets used, well, whatever was available, and often what was available were weapons captured from other nations. Often in different, strange, non-standardized calibers, but after all, the survival and use of Volkssturm units didn't last very long. They would have been fine for the last desperate defense of Germany. It's something that many people don't know, but among the rifles, the Carcano would actually be the most widely used and widespread in the hands of the Volkssturm. The production of the K98 and other German army weapons, well, all of it went to the German army, which in any case didn't have a desperate need. And for the Volkssturm, which was a party organization, not an army one, only the leftover stock remained. This doesn't mean that interesting weapons didn't come out of the Volkssturm and those around it. Just think of some extremely rare Volkssturm Gewehrs, which are now highly sought after by collectors. Volkssturm Gewehr developed specifically for the Volkssturm to be produced as simply as possible by small workshops. However, the 6.5 Carcano represented a logistical bottleneck. Even though there wasn't much hope that the Volkssturm units would last, one more type of ammunition in the logistics chain was a complication. At the end of 1944, a program was started to convert these Carcano rifles to the 8mm Mauser, the standard ammunition of the German army. The task of developing this conversion program was given to Krieghoff, a large Austrian company, and it, along with other smaller companies and even some Italian companies, would participate in this program. The main technical difficulty was that the Carcano obviously uses clips. The Mannlicher clips, the so-called M-block clips, are unlike Mauser clips, which are only used for loading and are not strictly necessary for the weapon to function. And this was quite a serious problem in this conversion. In fact, it was possible to adapt the Italian clips to the German ammunition, but this adaptation was not at all sufficient. At least not for the German infantry school, which in February 45 would judge this conversion of the clips unsatisfactory. However, Krieghoff had already started the conversion program simply for single-shot operation, waiting for the experiments on the repeating system to be completed. And they were already converting thousands of these Carcanos to the 8mm Mauser. Simply by retubing, then recalibrating the existing barrel, making a small modification to the bolt to accept the 8mm Mauser case head, they would put a wooden block in place of the Mannlicher-style magazine that the Carcano used. The weapon was single-shot this way, but it was better than nothing. Of course, it wasn't ideal at all if you think about it, but a single-shot rifle is better than no rifle at all. That's how desperate the Germans were then. But before this famous date in February, when this program was stopped, the one about adapting the clips because it was considered insufficient, the production actually continued because no one gave the order to stop. While waiting for a possible approval, it didn't make sense to keep the factories idle. There was also an attempt to make Carcano rifles with Mauser clips during all this. Unfortunately, it's a program that made very little progress and only a few examples are known. In Italy, however, various companies under Krieghoff's guidance continue to produce these Carcano rifles chambered in 8mm Mauser with modified clips, and many parts had already been produced when this program was abruptly ended. In fact, only the single-shot Carcano rifles chambered in 8mm Mauser would end up at the Volkssturm, while all these repeating Carcano rifles with special clips would remain in storage. The really interesting thing, and that's what we have to look at today, is that after the war, the companies that produced them, this one in particular was most likely converted by Franchi. The remaining parts were assembled and sold to various Middle Eastern countries, and then, around the 1990s, they returned to the collector's market. So let's take a look at this beautiful Carcano converted to 8mm Mauser. Okay, the condition is a bit worn. These are weapons that have all seen action. They were used during the war, even before being converted. There were many types of converted Carcanos. This one specifically is a Carcano cavalry carbine. You can also recognize it by the fact that the serial numbers don't have any prefix. It lacks German proof marks, but we know it's a German project. Also because the conversion involved, and it's very easy to recognize this way, these Carcanos converted to 8mm Mauser. Because they have these two screws, these two pins placed in the design by the Germans themselves to reinforce the action of the Carcano, the stock and the connection, the so-called recoil lug, the connection between the action and the stock, precisely to handle the 8mm Mauser, which is a cartridge just a bit more powerful than the 6.5 Carcano. So from the outside, there are only a few other differences. The most visible one of all is probably the rear sight, which has been changed. As you can see, it has been changed. It's clearly written here above, 7.9, referring to the 8mm Mauser, which is also known as 7.9 or 7.9 x57. As you can see, it's quite a rear sight. Very crude, very simple, very roughly made. It almost looks like it was handmade by someone. There are also small differences inside. In particular, the bolt face has been changed a bit, as we can see. So, the Krieghoffs that were actually converted in the first part of the program clearly have a small wooden block inside here that blocks the magazine. Others were converted as well, although they are quite rare in circulation, and they definitely weren't used because they weren't ready when Germany surrendered with Mauser-type stripper clips. This one here is one of the many converted from parts actually after the conflict, because at the end of the conflict, work on these conversions actually continued. In Italy, to use Carcano-type stripper clips, but adapted for 8mm Mauser. We'll see it during the live fire test, but we don't have one of these stripper clips since they're extremely rare. Not every Carcano clip will work. They need to be modified. These modified stripper clips are different, really. They're literally impossible to find, so it's more often used as a single shot. Let's just remove the bolt so we've seen these differences. And also, if you're familiar with how the bolt of a Carcano is made, you'll notice that this face of the bolt is different. Obviously, to properly accommodate and feed the 8mm Mauser. Apart from this, there are no substantial differences compared to regular Carcano rifles. In the end, it's a conversion done as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. The most interesting thing, perhaps more than anything else, is that the barrel remains the same. It's just been milled out to the 8mm caliber and basically relined. And the rifling inside has been redone. I would say we absolutely have to go try it out. And here we are back at the SIR range in Spessa, where we're testing this very interesting and beautiful Carcano chambered in 8mm Mauser. As already mentioned during the explanation, this is one of those Carcanos in particular that were finished after the war. It simply has the Republic's stamp, but it uses Carcano clips for the 8mm Mauser. Clips that are impossible to find, so we'll use this weapon the way the Volkssturm would have, loading it one round at a time. We put a round in the chamber, close the bolt, and after making the sign of the cross, we can fire. Oh, damn it! The blast is unbelievable. So the 8 Mauser has just a bit more powder in it, right? It's much more powerful than the 6.5 Carcano. This is already a very light carbine. It has a slightly short barrel, so there's still a bit of combustion happening when it fires. Damn! I don't think I've ever fired a carbine that kicks this hard. I swear. Let's load another round and think about it. The ones originally converted at Krykov were all single shot. So imagine you're a 16-year-old boy from the Volkssturm, or a 70-year-old man who's given a single-shot rifle. Here you go. Now go and push back the Soviets. It's not exactly a fun prospect. Damn it, the bayonet is opening with every shot. Did it catch the big fireball? We got the big fireball. Very well. And I assure you, it's a painful experience. Okay, this one flew out. Let's put it back in. You have to be careful when loading single shots to do it like this. Let's see again if we can see the big flame. Damn it! Here we go. You know what? I put the bayonet on, but every time I fire, because of the blast, it practically wants to open by itself. Other than that, aside from the terrible blast, the sights are quite visible. It's a bit rough. If you can see it, we've already seen it up close before, but let's look at it again. It's really rough in the sense that they made this one more quickly at the lowest possible cost, worrying relatively little about finishing it properly. Also because these are carbines, well, initially for the Volkssturm, so not even the third choice. Probably from this point of view, the fourth. Let's shoot here. I had another round in my pocket. Damn it. Fantastic. Let me get some more ammo and we'll try again. Ah! You got stuck up high. I see that with the clip it might be easier. Yes. Let's say the primary extraction. But we made it.
So now it's my turn to suffer. Jesus, protect me.
The microphone came off. The microphone got knocked off by the recoil. You can do it. I should smack it a bit. You're left-handed and must hit with your head down.
The important thing is to hit. Protect me, Maria.
Ah! How's the recoil?
It's not as bad as I thought.
Really?
It's much worse than it should be. It's not as bad as I thought. Let's hit them in the head. I got him in the head, the other one's head too, but good.
Anyway, another 20,000 are coming, and they have tanks.
Let me point something out. You can't see it yet, but I aimed at the base of the head. I hit it in the little square way up in the top left. This shoots a little high.
I owe 200 if I'm not mistaken.
I know. Now,
I have 150.
then we know that with the Carcano, if you want to hit someone close, you have to aim at the bottom edge.
At the ball, no.
You have to use the 2 rear notches and hold.
This one is a low hold, and then it shoots straight. By the way, the technique it teaches you. The Italian charges with the bayonet in a futurist run. I have a special fascination for conversions. The cruder they are, the better. This one is particularly crude. One more thing I didn't mention. We discussed it, right? Look at these 2 screws roughly attached to reinforce the stock, because the recoil is just a bit powerful. So, to keep the stock steady, they put these 2 screws in, which dig right into your shoulder with every shot. Usually I have pleasant experiences when shooting. This experience, to be fair, is pleasant, but you definitely need a certain dose of masochism to enjoy it. For heaven's sake, Christ God the blast. No, dear Soviet soldiers. But let's move on, kids. Who knows? Maybe with some momentum. Your thoughts turn to the leader. To the leader. Of course, the wooden block would make things a little easier because, I repeat, the single-shot conversions, the wooden block in here. So you put a round in and you don't have to insert it all the way into the barrel like I'm doing. But we're still talking about a single-shot weapon given to kids and old men in World War II to stop Soviet tanks. Damn, every shot is making my earplugs come out from the blast. Another 2 shots. Exactly. Thank you, everyone. Damn it. Damn it. I really have a fetish for conversions. I just can't help but love them no matter what they are. This also helps you understand why carbines, especially in these big calibers, I'm thinking of carbines like the Mosins, aren't always the most pleasant guns to shoot. Too much of the powder is still unburned. These are very lightweight guns. The 8mm Carcano program was born of desperation. To help you understand just how desperate was Germany in those years. No, Steiner's counterattack would not have solved absolutely anything. So once again, thank you to the owner of this weapon who came here today to Spessa to let me try it out. Without people like you, this channel simply wouldn't be possible. So if you have cool weapons for me to try, write to me. My email is in the channel information. If you want to contribute in other ways, there are channel t-shirts and memberships. They give you access to exclusive content. I repeat, if you don't want to or can't, consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing to the channel. It helps immensely. Big corporations like Google really don't like firearms at all. They're considered something bad and evil. Or like Mark Zuckerberg himself, who keeps denying that he's not a reptilian. He admitted that they really don't like firearms at all and actively, censor these things. So even if we all see that he has a forked tongue, unfortunately, what can we do? That's all from me. As always, see you next time. Thanks, see you next time. But he's a reptilian. Thank you. Ah!